After this video, you're going to have a full Romeo and Juliet essay plan that you can fit to any question. And if you watch the whole way through, I promise you will have points and paragraphs you can literally pre-learn and just adapt to the question. So the first point or key idea we have is in Romeo and Juliet, love is depicted as an all-consuming and volatile, so up and down, force that defies logic, disrupts social conventions, and dismantles familial loyalty. So the kind of first point generally is about love. And what I've done is I kind of created general points, and then you can adapt it to whatever the question is. So these are kind of general ideas that if a different question come up, you can still link it to love. Let me show you how you can link it to all of the different characters. So you can basically pick which character would link best to this overall point. So this idea that it is volatile, it's up and down. We see the volatility of love in Romeo and Juliet very clearly in the way that they love. They're very impulsive in their love, and also, of course, of how quickly they have a demise too. So we can see that Romeo, despite his romanticism, he becomes impulsively obsessive, allowing emotion to drive every major decision. So we see the volatility of love in the fact that he's very impulsive, he's very impetuous, meaning he's very quick to act, and every major decision he makes, which ends up being very life or death, is made very quickly and all in the pursuit of love. Juliet, though more measured than Romeo, she quickly commits herself entirely to love, even at the cost of her family and life. So remember, the whole play is set within 5 days. So each act is like one whole day. So think about how quickly they meet and they die. It's the quick and how rash and volatile this love is literally shown in the fact that it's 5 acts, it's 5 days. Friar Lawrence, remember Friar Lawrence he's like the priest, he is the religious figure, and he's almost like a father figure to Romeo. He sees the love as a political solution to the feud, but underestimates the emotional volatility of the lovers. So he again does it and sees it as a positive. He sees it as a way to remedy the feud. So when I say remedy, it's like a solution to the feud, because of course we've got this familial feud, but in actual fact, he doesn't realize the extent of the volatility of the lovers and how they're very impetuous, they're very impulsive. And then we got Lord Capulet. So he begins as a protective father, but attempts to control Juliet's love life, revealing the patriarchal limits placed on love. Now, patriarchal means male-dominated society. So, of course, we see Lord Capulet is the father of Juliet. So he really embodies and represents the patriarchal values in society of the fact that he owns his daughter. He's using her as a transaction. But, of course, the volatility of love, he is not really recognized. And even these patriarchal, strict expectations he tries to put on Juliet doesn't work. And what we've got for Romeo and Juliet as well, we've got every single character broken down with their key quotes and analysis for each of the key themes. And we only give you one that you need to know, and then you can also watch the other videos, which I'll show you. But for example, for Love and Romeo, you watch through the video, you can read through the documents, and what you'll be able to get is full grade 9 analysis with techniques, with grade 9 keywords. It linked to context, it linked to wow ideas, all done for you. Then all you've got to do is remember it and then adapt it to the question in the exam and kind of adapt your key ideas. And also, because it's a lot of last minute stuff, right? We don't have long until the exam. If you go on to previous content, you can see we've also got a last minute revision video, which summarizes the whole of Romeo and Juliet in just 44 minutes. It goes through all the 10 grade 9 keywords. It goes through context. It goes through Shakespeare's intentions. It goes through key themes. It goes through key quote overview for all the key characters. So if you just wanted one video to cover everything and paired it with this shows you how to kind of adapt it. Then you can look at this, read through the grade 9 essays on the Letter Pub, and it's basically all done for you. Now we're going to look at some evidence for each of the key quotes. So the first one we're going to look at is, with love's light, did I overperch these walls? This is Act 2, Scene 2. And again, this really shows their love. Romeo romanticizes danger, showing how love empowers him, but it also blinds him to risk, completely blinding him from what are the consequences of his love. And again, it's very impulsive, it's very rash. Then Juliet, if that thy bent of love be honourable, thy purpose marriage, send me word tomorrow. So she basically expresses a mature desire for commitment, but the haste reflects love's overpowering grip. So we can see that she does actually think about the idea of marriage and commitment and kind of a longer term view of love. But again, she's very hasty, very quick, and very impulsive in her pursuit of love with Romeo. Friar Lawrence, these violent delights have violent ends. This is in Act 2. So the friar warns the destructive potential of intense love, foreshadowing the tragic outcome. When I say foreshadowing, it means hinting at the future. So again, he is very aware. He seems almost quite omniscient, meaning all-knowing, in the fact that he presents Romeo and Juliet and the way that love can be overpowering, and he is understanding of that. And then Lord Capulet, and you be mine, I'll give you to my friend, and you be not, hang, beg, starve, die in the streets. So his reaction to Juliet's defiance reveals how love is governed by patriarchal control and ownership. So we can kind of see it in one sense with love, about them being very impulsive. We can see the friar understanding the consequences of impulsive love. And we can see Lord Capulet trying to contort love through a patriarchal lens, and him being very offended that Juliet does not conform to these patriarchal expectations. Now, of course, love is kind of like an overall point, but how can we adapt it to other key themes? And as I showed you on the Light Up Hub, we give you a key quote for each of the key themes, but you can still link it. Even if love didn't exactly come up, it still links to other key themes. So I'm going to show you how it would link. So even if the question isn't on love, this is how you could use it. So if it's anything to do with family or honor or like sacrifice, we could kind of think that love challenges and breaks these family expectations. We can link it to, of course, Lord Capulet and them going against the family's expectations and going against the familial feuds. We've got fate. Their love feels destined but also doomed, in the fact that, of course, it's this all-consuming love. We know from the offset that it is doomed. We've got conflict. Love is constantly tested by the violence surrounding them. And, of course, even their love does result in violence in the end. There's this real sense that where there's love, there's violence in the play. And then death. Love leads to self-destruction, showing how closely linked the two are. So we can see this idea that it leads to destruction, it leads to violence, it leads to tragic endings because they're so impulsive in their love. So even if any of these came up, you could still link it back to the point I just showed you, and you can still use like the technique analysis from the Light Up Hub and the context links because it's just already done for you. And then point or key idea number 2. So this is our second idea, that fate in Romeo and Juliet functions as an inescapable and omnipresent, so always there, force, subtly orchestrating the lover's downfall while deceiving characters into believing they act with free will. So this idea that fate is that things already predetermined, it's already set out for them what their outcome of their lives is going to be, and it's this fact that this is this looming tone underneath, this ominous tone, this dark tone, that no matter what they do, no matter how they love each other, they will always be bound to this inescapable dark fate. So Romeo constantly blames fate for his misfortunes, refusing to take full responsibility for his actions. So we see again, he's very dismissive of fate and he can't really take accountability for his own actions and blaming fate for a separation of his love. Juliet, though less overly fatalistic, so kind of believing that everything is without her control, her words and choices are filled with ominous foreshadowing. When I say ominous, it's dark, and foreshadowing is hinting at the future. So she'll say things that hint at the future, that she is going to have this imminent downfall and this imminent death. Friar Lawrence, he tries to outwit fate through planning, but instead becomes a tool in its fulfillment. So he, of course, tries to get Romeo and Juliet married, thinking it will solve the feud, but he actually accelerates their downfall in the end. And then Mercutio believes more in chance and human agency, yet ironically helps bring fate to life with his actions. So we can see, of course, the death of Mercutio actually again catalyzes, so it kickstarts more violence later on in the play, which actually leads to Romeo and Juliet's separation. And then some evidence that could suggest this. Oh, I am Fortune's fool. So he uses fate to justify his impulsive violence as if he's a puppet of the stars. So he does this in Act 3, but he also rejects fate. So we get to see this idea of this real battle with the idea of fate and agency from Romeo. Juliet, my grave is like to be my wedding bed. So Juliet's unconscious premonition reveals how fate has already tethered love and death. So the idea is that she has this ominous foreshadowing. So remember, foreshadowing is hinting at the future, in the fact she's saying the grave is her wedding bed. And we get to see that in the end, of course, her grave and her love are inextricably so closely linked. Friar Lawrence, a greater power that we contradict hath taught our intents. The friar concedes that fate, not human intention, governs the outcome. So he, of course, acknowledges that, reinforcing him as this very omniscient figure, so this all-knowing figure, yet he does still try to intervene in the hope that he could kind of be an exception to fate. And we, of course, see that, again, he just catalyzes, so he kickstarts, he accelerates the downfall of both Romeo and Juliet. Mercutio, a plague of both your houses, Act 3. His dying curse acts as a turning point in the play, invoking fate as a punisher of senseless conflict. So senseless is like, it's pointless. It's not, there's no point in the conflict. And we see, of course, Mercutio's death really does kickstart a lot of the violence that later goes on, that separates both Romeo and Juliet. And how would adapt this to other key themes? So remember, if something to do with fate didn't come up, how could we link it? Love. Fate shapes and dooms the lover's connection. we have this ominous foreshadowing, this dark undertone throughout the entirety of the play. Because, of course, the prologue, them being star-crossed lovers, we get that right at the beginning of the play, and it kind of basically it stains our ideas of love. It completely contorts it, because we know that no matter how much their love is pure, it'll always be overridden by fate. Violence, impulsive actions tied to pride and honour hasten fate's work. So they, of course, violent, and this idea of pride and honour, it does accelerate fate's work, as we see with Mercutio. Honour, the feud ensures that fate remains inescapable. So again, it's kind of linking to that honour, that violence. It's inescapable because individual characters, especially the male characters, want to protect their honour. Youth versus age, younger characters act rashly while older ones are powerless to stop what fate unfolds. So we get to see that, especially with like the Friar, for example, he is more aware of fate, although he does actually intervene. So you could argue, there is an argument to be had, that even though they know better about fate, they still do play into it when it suits them. But we get to see definitely the younger characters of Romeo and Juliet are a lot more hasty, and they're also very quick to dismiss fate in an attempt to try and reinforce their worldview and what they want to believe. And then lastly, point or key idea number 3 is violence and love are inextricably entwined, so they're very closely linked. The intensity of affection is mirrored by an equally powerful capacity for destruction, suggesting that passion in any form breeds volatility. So again, we can kind of link this really nicely to the first thing about love. But the fact that we see love in the play, we also see violence. So every time there's this loving moment, it's always followed, or it's beforehand, there is a sense of violence. So it's kind of like this intense violence is matched with this intense love. So Romeo, his descent into violence after Mercutio's death reveals a conflict between love and honour. Of course, we know that Romeo is within his family, and that's why he tries to take this vengeance. He tries to get this revenge back, and that's why he ends up killing Tybalt. And we get to see this idea of love and honour, because he's trying to protect his honour by protecting his family's name, but also that is Tybalt is Juliet's cousin. So we get to see this battle between love and honour. Juliet, as the play progresses, her language becomes darker and more violent, mirroring the destruction around her and how that love and violence are becoming interweaved. Tybalt embodies aggressive loyalty to family, always seeking to provoke and escalate conflict. So we get to see with Tybalt, he's very provocative, especially in his language and his violent language. And then Mercutio, his reckless temper and obsession with honour provokes the fatal turning point of the play. So of course, Mercutio's death sparks this turning point in the play, because as a result, a lot of violence happens after that. Of course, Romeo kills Tybalt, and then as a result of that, he has to flee, and there's that separation between Romeo and Juliet, which of course leads to their violent death. So we get to see it's a real turning point for violence and love. And then Lord Capulet presents violence as a means of control, even within his own household. Although he's not physically violent to Juliet, his language is very violent, because he's trying to preserve her, he's trying to control her, as of course it's a patriarchal, so male-dominated society. Then evidence. Either thou or I or both must go with him. This is in Romeo. Romeo abandons reasons and let vengeance rule him, making his fall from love to violence. So again, we get to see this idea that he starts off as this lover. He has this unrequited love, this one-sided love with Rosalind. We get to see him. So he's a true lover boy. And then we get to see this turning point, and we get to see, of course, the love with Juliet as well, and this turning point of him trying to protect his honour. Juliet, beautiful tyrant, fiend, angelical. So her oxymorons reflect this internal conflict. Oxymoron is 2 conflicting words. Love tainted by violent betrayal. So this is a really clear example when Romeo kills Tybalt, this love and violence that are inextricably linked. Tybalt, what drawn and talk of peace, I hate the word. Tybalt thrives off conflict, making peace impossible and perpetuating the feud. So, of course, if we see Romeo and Juliet as a symbol of love, we could also see Tybalt as a symbol of violence and hatred. We've actually got some really nice analysis as well on the Light Up Hub about male violence, especially with like Tybalt and Mercutio, who are a bit more minor characters, but are still really important because they could come up and are relevant as a comparison with Romeo, but also how they link to key themes. And that's a nice thing to kind of look at on the Light Up Hub if you have it. Mercutio, they have made worms meat of me. This is in Act 3. His death is both senseless and pivotal, escalating the violence that leads to tragedy. So we get this idea that it's senseless, it's futile, it's pointless, but it's also very pivotal in terms of the play and the tragedy. It's very important. That's what pivotal means. Lord Capulet's My Fingers Itch. This is Act 3. He threatens physical violence against Juliet, revealing how control and aggression are deeply linked in patriarchal power. So although he's not physically violent with her, he does insinuate it. He's violent in his language. He's very insulted in terms of his honour and his pride, because Juliet, as a daughter in the patriarchal society, so the male-dominated society, should be listening to her father, and she is disobeying because she is recklessly pursuing love. So again, we get to that sense of love and violence being inextricably linked. Now, how it adapt to other themes? Even if violence didn't come up, how could we link it? So love, so passion is frequently overshadowed and destroyed by violence. So again, really clearly, love and violence are always inextricably linked. Fate, every violent act accelerates the inevitable downfall. So every act of violence we see actually catalyzes, it kickstarts the downfall even quicker. Honour and masculinity, violence is presented as the default response to insult and pride. And we see that with all of the male characters, with Romeo, Tybalt, Mercutio, Lord Capulet. The Friar we don't, but that's because he's more of a religious figure, so it makes sense why we don't see that. And then youth. Young characters react impulsively, suggesting immaturity in a culture fueled by vengeance. So again, there's this impulsive, this hastiness, and we see that with the younger characters as represented with the Romeo, Mercutio, Tybalt, etc. And that is a kind of a full breakdown of how you can adapt this essay plan to any question, guys. Now, make sure you do subscribe to the channel because it helps the channel more than you know. And if you do want this all in more in detail, of course, do check out the Lights Up Hub because we have it all on there.